Welcome, everybody, to episode 5 of Pebble People. Today, we're going to be talking to Albert. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce your surname. Do you want to tell me?
Viljoen.
Okay. And we are going to be talking all things life skills for new parents. Think a little bit more about emotions, how to regulate those emotions in today's world. It's a little bit more complex because we've got careers, we've got all these kinds of pressures, we've got social media, and so it's harder than ever, I'd say. And so I'm super excited to have you here with us. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about what you do and what your work involves, and then we can get started.
Cool. Yeah, so I am a coach. I used to be a doctor. I studied medicine, actually, and then I practiced as a GP for about 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was quite frustrated because I felt like 5 minutes it's just not enough to actually help someone make the changes. And so it took me a while, and I ended up finding coaching, which I felt was a much more useful way for me to support someone to actually make better choices.
Yeah.
So we do leadership coaching. I coach a lot of parents who are at work. We have a few programs, Parents to Work. So it's close to my heart, and it is something that I see every single day, especially these days. You talk about all these pressures of social media, and something that I find quite interesting is that we have turned parenting into a job description. Esther Perel, the psychotherapist, actually talks about this, that parent used to be a role, and now it's a job description. So there's quite a lot of pressure we put on ourselves.
Yeah.
And what I like to offer people is a bit of just a space outside of that immersive role, to get a bit of perspective on what's actually going on for them. Parents especially struggle with that.
Yeah.
They don't really have the time or the space, and they not necessarily should have, because their little ones take up so much energy. And so coaching is really a space for them to have that one little room. Often it's very uncomfortable for them because they're not used to it.
Yeah.
Where they can just take a breath and take stock and check in with themselves, and then hopefully find a bit of fresh air and new perspectives to support them.
Cool. Would you say that some people might tend to avoid that situation where they can explore and sort of like come to terms with some of those things?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's interesting because it's one of those conundrums when we have so much stuff that pile up in the back.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, clearing up a cupboard. If it gets more and more messy, and the more messy it gets, the less we want to unpack it.
Yeah.
And so initially people are quite apprehensive. But what I find, especially in the process that we do, we really want to support people to do it in a systematic way. As you obviously help your kids, learn how to build and how to learn those life skills like cleaning up your room.
Yeah.
In some ways, we just need a little bit of space to check in. And more often than not, we feel a lot better simply because we've taken that first step to support ourselves. Because that's really the person that needs the most support in the dynamic, right, is the parent, because they're carrying all of the responsibilities.
Yeah, no, of course. And just thinking about that title, right, that role title as a parent, right, that comes with, I'm assuming, a shift in identity. So tell me a little bit more about that sort of shift in identity that you might see when you become a parent.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think a lot of parents can identify with this. I don't know if everyone is quite ready for it. They always say that you can never be ready for parenting. And everyone I've spoken to as a parent feels that even the people who told them couldn't have told them. You can only learn that through experience because the shift is so fundamental. And it's necessary, right? You have a little one coming into the world, they're fragile, they're dependent on you, and your entire identity shifts into mom and dad. And so the parts of you like Albert and friend and partner tend to fade into the background and sometimes completely get sidelined. And it's understandable, but what I find is quite important for your mental health and for your own sense of sanity.
Yeah.
Is to try and cultivate spaces where you can reclaim some of that identity.
Yeah.
There's this old saying where kids do what they see, not what they're told. And so I'm a firm believer that if kids can see their parents embracing more of themselves, the kids will then emulate that as well. So it can be hard initially because you're negotiating multiple parts.
Yeah.
But it's so important for a sustainable life, especially as you said these days, when everything is so full, to create those moments and spaces where we can reconnect to the silly part of myself or the friend. I went to a friend the other day and I took her just for a spa day, and it felt like I was just wedging something into her busy life.
Yes.
And sometimes it takes that wedge to really help you see, oh, there is life outside of parenting. And I am still this person that I, put away in the cupboard for so long.
Yeah, it's very, I think you're right about the wedging. I think there's an element of people get so focused, or parents get so focused on this is my life. And then anything that they're trying to wedge, like a little bit of social time, see my friends, see my family. And then they almost feel guilty that they're not doing their full-time job, which is to be a parent. And so do you have any advice on sort of navigating that guilt? As you grapple with a new identity, you've also got guilt. It's a real mind game.
Yeah, it's a lot. And especially if you're a working parent, because, they say that if you're a working parent, you have 2 jobs, and then you still have to get up and do your actual work that you get paid for. So it's just this combination of many things on your plate. So I like to think of just 2 key words because, try and keep it simple. Parents have enough going on.
Yeah.
And so the first keyword that I like to encourage people to start their day is permission. And it's permission to fail as a parent, at least by your own standards. It's permission to sometimes take a break. It's permission to see a friend, to have a timeout. It's permission to forget that email that you were supposed to send yesterday. And it's funny that we have to give ourselves permission because it implies that we should have been able to do it.
Yeah.
When in reality, we're humans, right? And we have limitations. In fact, we don't have even limitations. We just have natural limits. Like I am this shape. This is my body. And there's no limit. It's just the shape. That's the parameters. And so instead of thinking I couldn't juggle all the balls, it's important to frame it as there are just too many balls to juggle. And so maybe shifting the expectation for yourself and giving yourself permission is a good way to just set up the day so you don't pressure yourself with this 150% that we tend to load on ourselves.
Yeah.
And then invariably, as you say, the guilt will still come because you'll feel guilty for the permission you've given yourself.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And then by the end of the day, the keyword is forgiveness, is can I practice the art of forgiveness for myself? Because I'll fail in ways I didn't anticipate. And my kids will drive me insane in ways that I didn't anticipate. And so by practicing the permission and the forgiveness, I'm also emulating to my kids permission and forgiveness, skills that are fundamental for them to navigate as humans in an increasingly complicated world.
No, that's actually very useful. I think not only is it useful for parents, but just in everyday life to sort of turn around and say that, but especially I think as parents. So, we've talked about the modern pressures of like working parents specifically. Do you have any more insights on how that might be changing or what people can do, in the workplace? I know you work with a lot of businesses also and with their, with employees. And so you probably see this quite like day to day. But is there anything else here that we can unpack around working parents and the modern working world, I'd say?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's such a good question. And it's to start off with, it's complex and it's very new. I think we're expecting ourselves to perform in a world we haven't lived in yet. And so I think the first thing is to recognize that we're still learning about what it's like to be parents in a very complicated working world, especially after 2020 when work and life has just become one thing, right? And so what I often encourage people to do is to stimulate in the workplace open conversations about what it is to be a parent rather than trying to hide the parenting role or pretend that, I'm actually okay, like I can perform at peak. Because I think the problem with that is it instills this idea that we should be able to do 200%, when in reality we should be able to do 100%. Flexibility and adaptability are basic parenting skills, which I actually think workplaces can benefit from. Because let's say you're a parent who need more flexibility, you voice it as a leader in the workplace, and people start to get used to that. The people that aren't parents yet also then start having more permission to be human, to have an off day, to take a mental health break, to on another day, help someone else out who might be struggling. So we actually have a great opportunity to learn from parenthood how to do work better, rather than think how do we fit parenting into a very rigid traditional work structure. So for me, the main emphasis, it's an innovative space we're in. And if we shift the dial towards a more human approach, which is parenting rather than corporate culture, we could actually benefit in workplaces from that.
And I think it's very important to think a little bit about the balance of parents and non-parents in the workplace? Because I think, historically, there has been a bit of a divide, and I've heard it from both sides where parents get a lot of pressure because they have to take this off day. Their child is sick, and then you get somebody else saying, well, I wish I could take a day off, et cetera. And it's not a day off when your child is sick, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this us and them, I've definitely heard bubbling under the surface in my experience. So I'm sure it's out there. And so, as you say, like blurring the boundaries and allowing a sort of a term that is flexibility in general, I think could be very beneficial, right?
Absolutely. It's something that in the one coaching organization, we started looking at how do we frame things in organizations, right? So we talk about benefits and support, we talk about parents and non-parents, we talk about neurodiverse and non-neurodiverse.
Yeah.
And so we're actually creating so much more division through our terminology. And so how I like to frame it is, what are the enablers and the demands for you as an individual, rather than are you a parent or a non-parent? Because as a parent, you have certain demands that a non-parent doesn't have, but a non-parent has other demands. And so there is that sense of give and take for both. Also, as a parent, you have certain skills.
Yeah.
As a non-parent, you have other skills or capabilities. And if we emphasize that as part of the equation rather than as deterrence or problems within the workplace, I think we can actually have a much more creative work culture as well.
All right. So we know with parenting and with becoming a parent and also having this new baby at home that emotions running really high, right? There is definitely more emotions running high than like sort of the rational, practical voice in a lot of cases, right? Especially with new parents that haven't experienced it before. So tell me a little bit about how people can help, like how regulating those emotions or thinking about those emotions can help, parents today?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think because we live in such unprecedented times with technology and information overload, all of us are more edgy than we were 20 years ago. And so what I see often in the coaching room is that we all need something to help soothe ourselves in a way, because we're exposed to so much more. And so what I often encourage people to do, and I can actually take us through the practice, is what we call emotional regulation. And it starts with just glancing around the room. So you just take in objects and see if you can just notice. So see what you see. Don't think about it. Green, you can even name it, plug, carpet. And I intentionally move my neck around. And it's a way for my nervous system to just signal that I'm safe. I'm in a safe environment, I'm not being attacked. And the second one is grounding, which is putting your feet on the floor. You can even look at them, and then you can feel them. You can put some pressure into the floor. And it's a way of signaling to your brain you're stable. And then the last one is breathing, and there's a couple of like slow breathing practices, like inhale for 4, exhale for 5. But I'd usually start with the room and the grounding, because breathing can still feel a bit agitated in the beginning.
Yeah.
And we did that in less than a minute. So this is one of the emotional regulation practices that I encourage people to just bookmark into their day.
Yeah.
And then as a way that they're regulating, they're also then regulating their kids, and they can teach their kids these skills. There's actually a company called Happy Humans that teach kids these emotional regulation skills that none of us were taught in school.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think to myself, what if I had been taught these things, before I became an adult and then had to sort of, catch up and figure it out. But this is super helpful. I can already feel the impact of it from you just describing it. And so that's Happy Humans is for children. Is there a similar thing that adults can do or parents can do in order to find more information on emotional regulation?
No, it's an interesting question. I mean, mainly people practice this either in meditation practices, which is a bit more of a full-on practice, and a lot of people say it's just too much of a chore for them to get started. There's a couple of apps like Calm and Headspace, but the light touch practices that you implement in your day isn't really available. My partner and I actually are developing a program now, a pilot program, to test this out. And it's basically group coaching sessions for 6 weeks. It's like every 2 weeks. A night where we talk through the practices, and then we have content that we share. And so we're actually trying to test that out to see, can we support people with very easy practices to just start embedding into their day so they don't feel like they need to become a Zen master. and become like a guru in order to just feel a bit more regulated and stable.
Oh, great. And so you mentioned it's a pilot program. Does that mean that anybody can sign up, or will they have to wait? Tell
Anybody
me a bit
can
more.
Sign up. I can share the details as well afterwards.
Perfect.
We're actually launching in May, the first one. So if it's a bit short notice, we'll probably run a second one later on in the year. And it's basically, we're testing out things that we're already doing coaching to try and see what can we learn and make a little bit easier, because, you know, it's like the skills we didn't actually learn as kids. How do we now catch up as adults?
Yeah, that's really great. And I think for parents specifically, it needs to work within, you know, a sort of a busy schedule of modern parenting / work / everything else.
We do the coaching alongside it just to help parents unlearn some of those bad habits, like I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, I'm doom scrolling. And then we're actually training our nervous system to get more tired. So we're running it as a program to help parents kind of lift them out of that pattern and then introduce these new, easier and light touch patterns to really regulate their nervous systems.
So Albert, we've covered so much ground and it's been super interesting. We've even learned some basic, you know, emotional regulation skills just on this, you know, short podcast. So I can already see and feel how the benefits could be, you know, enormous. But is there anything else you want to touch on or tell us more about before we wrap up?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I can even feel how serious this conversation is. And parenting is such a serious job. So something I need to remind myself of as a coach and as a human, and remind my parents of, and the parents that I work with, is to have more fun, to really allow your kids, you know, they always say that kids are our teachers, but I think we forget how. We forget that they remind us that life can be wonderful and an adventure. And sometimes letting go a little bit of the parent role, like we said in the beginning, and just putting on your silly role.
Yeah.
It's not just more enjoyable and makes the process more engaging and bonds you with your kid, but it also is good for you as an adult. It makes us more open to learning. It enables us to think creatively. So it has multiple benefits. If you forget everything on this podcast, I'd say just remember to have fun.
Mm-hmm. Almost channel your fun auntie or fun uncle for the day.
Exactly.
Instead of just be, I am the serious parent, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time today. And
Thank you.
Yeah, all the best. We wish you, you know, with your new course, a lot of success, but we also wish new parents a lot of success and fun.
Yes, have fun.